Hello and welcome to this Forex Preview at xm.com. I'm Maria Pachurthis, and joining me is lead investment analyst Rafi Boyadjian. We'll be discussing upcoming Australian data and the outlook for the Aussie. So Rafi, second quarter data is on the way over the next few days, and it's expected to be solid. Do you think these numbers will matter much for the RBA's upcoming policy meeting on the 7th of September?
Well, Maria, it is going to be a busy calendar for Australia in the next few days. So the first one is up on Thursday. We've got capital expenditure numbers coming up for the second quarter. And so expectations are for increasing business spending of 2.5% over the period. That's quite a bit of a slowdown from the prior period when the Australian economy was, in fact, still recovering from the very first lockdown we had back in 2020. But nevertheless, it's still fairly comparable to pre-pandemic levels. So that would be considered as a fairly healthy pace of growth for capital expenditure. Then we've got net exports contribution on Tuesday, so that's going to show us how much exports contributed to the Australian economy in the second quarter. Of course, exports plays a big part for driving growth in Australia. Australia is a massive exporter of natural resources, particularly to China. And then a day later, on Wednesday, September 1st, we've got the GDP numbers for the second quarter. Now, again, we are expecting a notable slowdown from the first quarter. GDP is expected at 0.7% in the 3 months to June. But again, when comparing this to pre-pandemic levels, it's still a very solid rate of growth. The question is, will it matter for the RBA? We know that from mid to late July, we had those first lockdowns in quite some time in Australia due to the outbreak of the Delta variant. And this has really cast some doubt about the RBA's plans to taper its bond purchases. So it is quite likely that the RBA will be putting more focus on more forward-looking data, such as PMI surveys, which are a bit more up-to-date than the hard data, such as the second quarter numbers. But nevertheless, the data is good. It could buy policymakers some time before they decide whether to pause their tapering plans, because it's still not quite clear what the economic toll will be from the latest lockdowns.
Okay, now regarding both the short and longer term outlook for the Aussie, what should we expect? Are significant gains difficult if there isn't a substantial improvement in the virus situation?
Well, in the very near term, we are seeing the Aussie is actually benefiting from this big bounce we're seeing in market sentiment that comes on the back of easing Fed taper expectations, as well as some subsiding of Delta fears, particularly the fact that China now does seem to have managed to have gotten the virus under control. So that's boosting overall sentiment in the market. So the Aussie has rebounded quite substantially from last week's lows. Beyond that, though, a lot will depend on the Fed. In fact, what the US Federal Reserve announces or doesn't announce at the Jackson Hole symposium that's due to take place between Thursday and Saturday. So the outcome of that will probably play a role, what happens to the Australian dollar next week. And then the week after, on September 7th, we've got the RBA policy meeting, and there's question marks whether or not the RBA, we are going to see a more dovish tilt from the RBA. Of course, the RBA had turned much more hawkish, whether we're going to see a bit of reversal of that. But in the more medium term, a lot will depend on how fast Australia vaccinates its population. We've heard from the Australian Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, recently saying that he wants to see 70% of Australians vaccinated before they begin to loosen restrictions, and 80% to be vaccinated before they get rid of lockdowns altogether. So that could take some time, could take several weeks, if not months. So it's quite likely that it's not just going to be the third quarter data that's going to be bad. It could spill over into the fourth quarter as well. And if that was to be the case, then it will definitely have a much more impact on RBA policy. So the outlooks for the time being isn't looking too great for the Australian dollar, even though in the short term, it's seeing quite a strong rebound.
Rafi, thanks so much. And thanks for joining us at xm.com.